quiet, secretive, and always done under the cover of the internet. It's like the perfect burglary that takes place in pitch black. There's no trace of the perpetrator on the CCTV camera footage, no fingerprints, and no leads. With hacking, it's all digital, so whatever virtual fingerprints you might have left behind can be covered up, deleted, or hidden. This is why so many cybercriminals get away with their crimes. This is a story about a group of very savvy businessmen who made a fortune exploiting people online. These are true stories from the dark side of the internet. I'm Jack Resider. This is Darknet Diaries.
Shout out to Darknet Diaries. Good shit. You can check out their channel.
In July 2014, Hold Security, a small firm that specializes in external cyber threat intelligence, made an unbelievable discovery. This small firm, which supposedly monitors the dark web for hacker activity that may be a threat to their clients, reported to the New York Times claiming to have found a credential dump containing 4.5 billion usernames and passwords on the dark web. Now, 4.5 billion usernames and passwords is just a crazy amount of credentials. When Hold Security filtered out duplicates, they were left with 1.2 billion credentials. But still, a credential dump that large would be the biggest credential dump ever found. The New York Times ran with this story, but the security community was pretty skeptical.
About that
First,
time.
everyone wanted to see what was in the dump, but Hold Security wouldn't reveal this data to anyone. Later, Hold Security announced that for a $120 fee, they would tell companies whether the dump included credentials from their websites. So, with Hold Security claiming they had one of the largest dumps ever and not sharing it with anyone, except a few people who paid to search for their own names, it was just a little hard to trust.
Crucial.
Alex Holden, the CEO of Hold Security, was interviewed by Forbes. This is what he said.
Well, Tom, let me try to clear up the criticisms here. There are two different pieces to this puzzle. First of all, we have 1.2 billion credentials that belong to about 500 million email addresses, unique email addresses. And these are the individuals who entrusted their credentials to different web services websites. And these credentials were stored on those websites. Unfortunately, through no wrongdoing on the individual side, this information had been stolen by the hackers. So these individuals are the ultimate victims in this particular crime.
Later, Hold Security released a summary report of the dump. They said the dump was from 420,000 different websites that had been breached, some of which were Fortune 500 companies. The report listed some of the companies that were breached, and they called the group that stole this data Cybervore, which means cyber thief in Russian. 420,000 websites is a huge proportion of the entire World Wide Web. So, at this point, even I think this dump sounds a bit ridiculous to me, because it just doesn't add up. But let's switch gears for a second. Imagine you're part of a IT security team at the JP Morgan Chase Bank. You work for the biggest bank in the US and the 6th biggest bank in the world. Your bank pretty much dominates the financial sector in terms of investments and banking. Imagine you're one of JP Morgan Chase's 250,000 employees, scattered across 171 offices in 39 different countries. And imagine you're part of the team that's responsible for protecting data in this bank, which has an annual revenue of $115 billion.
Big reset.
Of which about $10 billion is spent on tech and $250 million a year is spent on cybersecurity. There's about 1,000 people working with you in the IT security team at JP Morgan Chase. Now, I'm not sure if any company spends more money on security than JP Morgan Chase, but either way, they aren't messing around when it comes to protecting their networks. So, if you were on the IT security team of JP Morgan Chase and you saw that Hold Security released a summary report, would you take a look to see which companies had been breached? Of course you do. It doesn't matter if it's real or not. Your company is spending every dollar it can to do everything to protect the network. You'd definitely be looking at this report. You'd be looking at every report that might have anything to do with JP Morgan Chase's IT security. So, that's just what happened. An IT security analyst at JP Morgan Chase did read Hold Security's report. In it, Hold Security claimed the website for a charity race sponsored by JP Morgan called Corporate Challenge was breached. This site had been used by JP Morgan employees to register for the race. It was hosted by a company called Simco Data Systems. As it happened, Simco Data Systems was also mentioned in the Hold Security
Lower that
report.
volume.
It claimed that Simco had been breached too. So if JP Morgan Chase employees were registering
as
at
fuck.
that site, then it's possible their data was
I look
stolen.
forward to this for a long
And
time.
this caused the IT security analysts at JP Morgan Chase
Sometimes it
to
was
look into this a little
dreading
more.
anticipation, others it's
So,
looking
the security team at JP Morgan Chase contacted Simco Data
Excitement.
Systems to investigate the claims made by Hold Security. Simco
Impatient
Data
excitement.
dug around their network logs and confirmed that the corporate
But it
challenge
looks like it's about
website
that time.
was hacked and breached. The hackers had stolen an SSL certificate from the site, and the hack was executed through a few IP addresses that had been creeping around the network without any legitimate reason to be there. 2 techs from the JP Morgan Chase office in Columbus, Ohio went over to Simco Data Systems office in
Crucial.
Michigan to get copies of any forensic data they could find. They wanted to know exactly what had been stolen and understand the indicators of compromise. As the JP Morgan Chase security team was collecting data from Simco, they were using this data, including IP addresses, to search their own logs for any similar activity. They were looking for any trace of a breach and any sign of activity from the IP addresses associated with the Simco data breach. And sure enough, they found the same 11 IP addresses that had been used to execute the Simco breach had also been used to attack JP Morgan Chase. What's more, some of these attacks against JP Morgan Chase had been successful. The biggest bank in America had been
Crucial.
hacked, and they never even knew it happened.
Damn. That's what's up.
At this point, JP Morgan Chase contacted the
G
FBI
shit.
and handed over these IP addresses to the Financial Services Information Sharing Analysis Center. This is an organization that circulates this kind of data to banks and financial institutes so they can check whether they have been breached. Up until this point, JP Morgan Chase had kept this whole situation under wraps while they were working to figure out what was going on. But this kind of breach is a huge deal, and they weren't going to be able to keep quiet about this for long. We don't know exactly how the hackers jumped from the charity's website into the bank's servers, but I've got a few theories. First, it's possible that the hacker gained access to this corporate challenge charity site. How? Possibly by hacking through Simco Data Systems, which was the hosting provider for the corporate challenge charity site. So if the hosting provider got hacked, then the hackers would have access to the back end of all the other websites that hosting provider hosts. So if they got into the corporate challenge website that way, they could have accessed the credentials for all the JP Morgan employees that were registering on the site.
Huh?
Maybe
Where you
some of
going?
those username and passwords were the same usernames and passwords used to log into JP Morgan Chase's network. This kind of tactic would likely work because so many people reuse passwords on multiple sites. Any JP Morgan employee who used their JP Morgan network password on another site would have made their network vulnerable for this kind of attack. So that's one theory. The other is that this hacker group might have targeted an IT admin at JP Morgan Chase through spear phishing or some other attack that got them remote access into the admin's computer. And if a hacker was able to do that, they'd be able to steal that IT admin's network credentials and do whatever they want from there. Either way, what we know is that this hacker group did have a valid login to a JP Morgan server. And with that, they were able to get past the huge front gates of this super secure JP Morgan Chase network.
That's crucial.
But once they got past the front gates, they still needed to figure out where to go.
Right.
It's as if they broke into a bank but didn't know where the safe was. They were just wandering through the network, and they hadn't actually gained access to anything valuable yet. There was an old server that the bank used to manage employee benefits data. It was still running, just not used very often. See, there's 250,000 employees at JP Morgan Chase, and they're using about 500,000 computers in this network. It's not easy for such a large company to manage 500,000 computers. And in this case, the employee benefits server had been neglected. It wasn't updated with the latest security patches and features, and it wasn't set up for two-factor authentication, which would have required users to enter a time-sensitive token code with their password to get in. the hackers discovered this server on the network and used their stolen credentials to log in. This is a perfect example of when two-factor authentication probably would have stopped these hackers from getting any further into the network. Anyway, once a skilled hacker establishes access to a network, they're going to want to create a persistent connection and elevate their privileges. They'll need a persistent connection in case their connection gets dropped, then they have a guaranteed way to get back into that server. So the hackers created a backdoor into the JP Morgan Chase network. This was a point of access that only the hackers would know about, but the security team wouldn't be able to detect them. Once they did that, they began crawling around the network, looking for something in particular. Slowly made their way to the systems they were after. They were good, hiding their tracks, doing things just the right way to avoid setting off alarms, avoid being detected by antivirus scans. For months, these hackers have been creeping around, quietly accessing databases and exporting data to their own servers as they went along. And all the while, they were silent and invisible. In all, they breached over 90 of JP Morgan Chase's servers, which included multiple databases used to store customer information. This story became public on August 27th, 2014, when Michael Riley and Jordan Robertson reported on this hack in an article in Bloomberg. They revealed that there had been a successful breach at JP Morgan Chase, and they said it was the work of Russian hackers. The accusation that this was a nation-state attack on U.S. financial infrastructure grabbed the attention of the U.S. financial system. Could it be that Kremlin-sponsored hackers have managed to get inside the networks of JP Morgan Chase, breach layer after layer of security, and make off with tons of customer data without JP Morgan Chase knowing anything about it? It wasn't until the bank filed a disclosure with the Security Exchange Commission on October 2nd that we learned more details about this hack. It was way worse than anyone thought. The hackers had accessed multiple customer databases and stole 83 million personal identifiable records.
Damn.
Morgan Chase's customers. These records were associated with 76 million households and 7 million small businesses, pretty much all located in the U.S. To put that into context, in 2014 there was something like 127 million U.S. households. So that's around 60% of all U.S. households that got their information stolen from this hack. The idea that Russians were behind this hack and that they were probably state-sponsored wasn't all that surprising. I mean, just a few months before this, the U.S. had put a load of heavy sanctions on Russia's financial infrastructure. See, in 2014, that was the year when Putin decided he wanted to take the Crimea Peninsula from Ukraine. Putin dispatched scores of massed armed soldiers to Crimea, and they seized the territory, raising Russian flags, and then went on to take control of the cities and the Supreme Council building. The Supreme Council is sort of like the Crimean Parliament. The current PM was booted out, and a new one was voted in. Although there were some good reasons to doubt the fairness of this election, this was the most blatant land grab in Europe since World War II. Russia's invasion of Crimea stirred up a whirlwind of controversy. The U.S. and EU, and of course Ukraine, strongly condemned Russia's tactics and said that Putin had violated multiple local and international laws. So the U.S. and EU imposed sanctions against Russia. These sanctions threatened to tip the already fragile Russian economy into recession. The U.S. and EU intended for these sanctions to force Putin to relent and relinquish control of the Crimean Peninsula back to Ukraine. But Putin wasn't having any of it. He denounced the U.S. and EU for imposing these sanctions, which he said was just another example of aggressive U.S. foreign policy, and he warned that Russia may retaliate against these actions. So it seemed possible that the hack on JP Morgan Chase was the first volley of Russia's retaliation. There's a clip from CNN discussing the very idea.
The FBI is investigating a series of cyber attacks against U.S. banks thought to be coming from Russia. Hackers are believed to have accessed sensitive information from several financial institutions, including banking giant JP Morgan Chase. Could this be retaliation for Western sanctions against the Russians? Christine Romans is here with more. Is this retaliation? Well, that's what the investigation is going to have to really zero in on here. Quite frankly, Allison, a U.S. official tells us that the location of the hacker still isn't clear. But given the sophistication of this, the cybersecurity community is saying this investigation appears to center, it should definitely center on Russia. Now, hackers from Russia are often top FBI suspects, and the timing of the hack has raised suspicions given recent U.S. sanctions against Russia. Also, still this big question, the motivation. Still unclear if the attack was financially or politically motivated. mid-sized